Welcome to the Blind Justice Podcast, where you discover the insider secrets of injury and accident cases, and all of your law questions get answered. Now, here's your host, Chicago injury lawyer, Scott DeSalvo.
It is the Amelia Finnefrock Show with special guest, Scott DeSalvo.
Wait, what?
Yeah, welcome to the Blind Justice Podcast, folks. Scott DeSalvo and Amelia Finnefrock, my lovely and talented co-host.
And not a lawyer, just FYI.
And not a lawyer.
Yes.
But pretty awesome.
Oh, yes.
So we're continuing our series of answering questions people have. If you have a question, feel free to submit it to the office. You can email it. You can call. Happy to do it.
Yes.
Happy to answer the question. Or if you have a case you want to talk about, obviously I give free consultations. Most people I give consults to, it doesn't result in a case, but it definitely gives people peace of mind.
Yeah.
And there's never a charge. So I'm happy to take the time. I've always done that. I'm happy to take the time to do it. And I also have a book and a CD that I wrote. So I wrote a book about the most common tricks and pitfalls in injury cases, and I also recorded a CD and created a DVD. And I produce that stuff in-house. Well, the book I pay to have it, printed and published, but the CDs and DVDs I make in-house, and I send them out for free to anybody who has, a case or has some information. Because sometimes people don't want to call a lawyer right away. They want to research it a little bit.
Right.
So it's a good resource. You guys can go to my website, DeSalvoLaw/DVD, and there's an order sheet on there. You can fill it out, and we mail it out to you for free, or you can just call the office and get a free copy of that.
And you can't put a price on peace of mind. I mean, I'm a worrier, so that's something I would do if, God forbid.
I mean, the one thing I'll say before we get to the question, though, is that obviously the podcast is informational. The book and the CD and the DVD and the other stuff I send out to people is informational. But your situation, you got to talk to a lawyer to really get legal advice.
Absolutely.
So today we're talking about a Chicago trip and fall situation. And I do, quite a bit of that, and I'm pretty good at it.
Yeah, you're really good at it.
Well, I know a thing or two about a thing or two. No, that's true. Ain't my first rodeo, cowgirl.
Ain't my first rodeo.
So take it away, Amelia.
You got it. Hi, I have a question for the Chicago trip and fall lawyer. I was walking down the street, and I looked up to see if the traffic signal was green or red as I was approaching the street corner. Unfortunately, I tripped over some bolts that were sticking up from the sidewalk. I do not know whether they were from an old traffic sign or traffic pole, but there were 4 of them, and they were rusty and sticking up like 3 or 4 inches. I broke my wrist. Who would I even call to see if they will help me with the hospital bills? The city? How can I figure out who left the bolts there? Ooh.
Yeah, so horrible,
God.
right?
Where are you walking?
The first question is, who removes a sign or a pole and then doesn't remove the anchor bolts?
That's pretty terrible.
That's crazy.
No, that is crazy.
It's funny because right now in my office, I think I have 3 or 4 cases just like this.
Really?
Yeah,
oh
it's way more common than you think it is.
That is confusing. I'd think the city, but I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, people trip and fall over all sorts of things, but when you're on the sidewalk walking where you're supposed to be walking, and somebody left anchor bolts in the concrete like that, that's ridiculous.
Lazy.
The funny thing is, on any city sidewalk, it's city property, right? Mm-hmm. And you need a permit from the city to put anything on the sidewalk or remove anything.
I've heard of that.
So the city should have records of that, right?
Right.
And whoever put the pole or phone booth or whatever it is on the sidewalk or removed it should also have records, right?
Of course. That makes sense.
Except, the city fights these cases. The other thing I guess I should mention is if you put something on a city sidewalk, you request a traffic sign, like a no parking sign, or you request to install a pole or post or sign on city property, you have to pay the city a yearly fee to maintain that, they call it a fixture on city property. So if they're getting paid from you yearly, they've got to have some records or documents, right?
Yeah.
So the thing is, the city fights these cases, and what they usually do is, I'm not sure whether the city just does a completely terrible job of record keeping, or whether they're purposely, right,
Yeah.
or whether they purposely don't produce documents that they know they probably have. Just don't look for them and say, we don't know. I don't know which it is, but it is actually quite difficult initially to figure out what was there, whose was it, who owned it, who removed it.
If no one's keeping records, then it's...
Well, nobody in the neighborhood is going to do that, right?
No,
I mean, the person who
not.
owns the property is responsible for that.
Right.
The person who put the property there is responsible for that. But here's the good news. The cases are a fight, but I have many, many ways I have developed over the years to figure this stuff out.
Oh, very cool.
And some of it's pretty technical. I'm not going to talk about it on the podcast. But
Dang it.
no matter what, if something like this happened to you, you fall on a city sidewalk, you trip and fall over bolts on the sidewalk, you fall because of a crack in a sidewalk, or anything like that, this is not something where you can call the city of Chicago and they're ever going to pay your bills. You got to talk to a lawyer. It's just that simple.
Wow. Yeah.
And you're not going to call the city and say, "Oh yeah, it was Illinois Bell." They're responsible. Here's their address.
Let me pull it up. Oh, nothing. All right, goodbye.
No, right.
Oh,
They're not gonna help you,
It
and
sounds
they don't.
like the city.
Yeah. So, end of the day, if you don't have a lawyer, and not just any lawyer, you got to have a lawyer who has handled cases like this
can
and
fight for you.
Sort of knows the ins and outs.
Right.
Right. Because you can't just take the city's answer no for an answer, right? You have to actually do the work.
I mean, she broke her wrist.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty serious, right?
Or he.
Yeah.
I don't know why I said she. But yeah, I mean, I don't know what kind of work they do, but I can imagine a wrist is with everyday movements, how debilitating.
Well, here's the truth. A broken bone can be... broken bone's never great.
Right.
But you can have a broken bone where there's no surgery and no nothing, right?
Yeah.
And it heals pretty well. And other than some arthritis and occasional pain, it's not that big a deal.
Right.
All the way through, you get joints involved, you get ligaments and tendons involved,
Yeah.
you lose range of motion,
Yeah.
you lose strength. So they didn't really give us much information about how serious the injury was
Sure.
or whether they had surgery, but there's a hospital bill which suggests that if they just mention a hospital bill, maybe this person's fracture isn't that serious. But even a wrist fracture can really affect your life, right?
Yeah.
But it's like so many of these cases. The truth is, if you have a fender bender and you have an ER bill, and that's it, you can call the insurance company in a car crash case. They might pay your ER bill and give you a couple $100.
Right.
If that's all you want, you have a shot in a case like that.
Okay.
Right?
Right, yeah.
Or, in a previous podcast, we talked about the time that my friend had a workers' comp case.
Yes.
And his company was being more than fair with him, and I told him, don't hire me, settle it.
Right.
So there are situations where, they're going to kick me out of the plaintiffs' lawyers union for saying this.
Right.
There are situations where you don't necessarily need a Chicago injury lawyer to help you with your case, but if you have a trip and fall or a slip and fall in Chicago, these are the kinds of cases where you need a lawyer to handle the case for you.
Yeah.
Just that simple. So,
well, I have a quick question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, let's say, she trips and falls with these bolts. She broke her wrist. Is this something you could involve the police in? Would you want a police report, or is it just better to call a lawyer in this case?
Well, it depends on the circumstance. Nobody falls and hurts themselves and then thinks of calling the police.
Yeah.
Right? I've never, ever had anybody do that.
I don't think I would either.
Yeah.
But in my mind, the last podcast we talked about how
police reports and stuff in car
crashes.
crashes.
If you are going, just in general, just have a record of it. And since the city doesn't keep records, then maybe stacking your odds against.
Oh yeah, I've had people who've fallen over the years. People who have fallen, and then they wait to go to the doctor, and there's no witnesses to their fall. There's no documentation, and then they go to the doctor a week later and say, a week ago I fell. Well, that opens up your case to the defense saying, wait a minute, you fell and hurt yourself, you didn't report it,
right?
There's no witnesses, you know what I mean? So you're just creating a defense. So that's why I always tell people, if you fall or if you get hurt, get checked out, right? Just document it and make sure that the way you describe your fall is accurate.
Right.
I've had a lot of cases, and it's actually remarkably common. I have some friends who are doctors, and, off the record, they admit to me that, you go into an ER or the paramedics come and ask you what happened, and they do a terrible job of documenting,
Oh my God.
like, where you fell or how you fell.
That's terrible.
Yeah, and so then defendants use the medical records that are
Shitty
inaccurate.
information. Yes.
Yeah. But here's something a doctor friend told me. When doctors or nurses or medical people are documenting a chart, the rule is that the more pertinent the information, the more accurate it has to be.
Right.
And if it's not really relevant to the care and treatment of the patient, it's less important to document accurately. So when they're talking to an injured person, they want to make sure they get that it's the right shoulder, not the left shoulder, right? Or it's their neck hurts and their back hurts, but not their foot, right?
Right.
Because that's pertinent to rendering care and treatment.
Sure.
But exactly where they fell and exactly how they fell actually isn't pertinent at all to rendering care and treatment. So sloppy documentation in medical records hurts injured people in their claim, but doctors and nurses aren't trained to take a deposition from somebody when they come into the ER. Does that make sense?
That's frustrating. No,
Well,
how frustrating.
Yeah, it's just one in a million things that I've learned over the years handling these cases that you have to be mindful of.
Right.
And it's just another example why, I approach these cases from a broad justice standpoint, right? Is it fair that the city of Chicago or whatever city has the sidewalk, taxes the crap out of its citizens, right? And then they remove a sign. They don't produce the records to admit that they removed it. And they do half a job. They don't cut the bolts down or remove the bolts.
No.
They know it's a sidewalk where lots of people walk. And then somebody trips on their half-done job, and they throw up their hands and say, yeah, sue us. That's horrible, right?
That is absolutely terrible.
It's a bad attitude, and so definitely I think this person has a case.
I think so, too.
But definitely talk to a lawyer.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining me once again, Amelia.
Thank you for having me.
You did
Mr.
such a
DeSalvo.
fantastic job.
I practice every day.
Everyone, thank you for listening.
Thank you.
And stay tuned for our next podcast when it is released. And everybody have a great day, and call me if I can be of assistance.
Call him.
Thanks for listening. I truly hope that the information in the podcast helps you no matter the situation you find yourself in. But you might need more answers or some more direct help. So there are 3 ways for you easily to find out more and to get help. If you call my toll-free 24-hour helpline, 888-HURT-318, you'll have a couple of options. 888-HURT-318 is my toll-free 24-hour telephone line. You can call that number and speak with my team night or day. First, you can call 888-HURT-318, and you can speak to me for a free consultation about your case or situation. That's always free and no obligation. Second, you can tell the operator that you'd like a free copy of my injury DVD and book. I created the DVD and book, and I give it away for free to injured people who need answers, but who might not be ready to talk to a lawyer yet. Same deal, 100% free, 100% no obligation. Third and finally, you can check out my YouTube channel for informative videos about the injury case and claims process, or check out my other podcasts for more information and interesting interviews with people who know different things about various aspects of the law. I've put all of this together to help you and to answer your questions. Now, you can also help me, and I hope that you will. If you enjoyed the podcast and if it helped you at all, please subscribe, and if you can, take a minute and please post a positive review of the show. If you're listening to the podcast on YouTube, like the video and subscribe to my YouTube channel. And if you know anyone who might enjoy the podcast, please spread the word and share it on Facebook. It's my mission to spread good information to as many people as possible, and your liking and reviewing and subscribing to the podcast helps me get the word out. Thanks again. This podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only. It doesn't substitute for consulting with a lawyer. If you have a case, speak with a lawyer right away.